You're listening to DruidCast episode 163. Hello my friends and welcome to DruidCast episode 163. I am your host Dave the Bard, and DruidCast is brought to you on or around the 20th of every month by the Order of Bards, Ovates and Druids. If you want to find out more about the Order and our courses, you can do that right over there at our website at www.druidry.org. What a beautiful opening to the show. You just heard Waltz for the Little Mermaid by Maid Go from her new album Heartstrings, and don't forget you can find links to all of the artists featured on DruidCast in the episode show notes. And if you are a musician, poet or storyteller and you would like to be played on the show, do send me an email at podcast@druidry.org. It would be great to hear from you. Well, my friends, I hope you're all keeping well and safe. I had a lot of great feedback from you saying how much you enjoyed the new Walking the Talk segment of the show last month, and it sounds like a lot of you felt like you came on the walk with me and Kerry and shared those moments with us, which is great to hear. And man, have I got something special for you this month. Many of you will know the historical significance of the Isle of Ynys Môn, or as it's known now, the Isle of Anglesey, that sits just off the coast of North Wales. That history is important to ancient and to modern Druids. Well, over the weekend of the autumn equinox, me and Kerry took a trip to Anglesey to spend some very precious time with our good friends Christopher and Ian. And during that weekend, I had the chance to record a Walking the Talk section with Christopher. The Christopher I'm talking about is, of course, the author and Druid Christopher Hughes, who we have had a number of times on the show, but this time we visit 3 of the sacred sites on Anglesey and talk about the landscape and the history of this very important place. I had bought a lovely dedicated recorder for the Walking the Talk sections, but I was obviously so excited to be spending our first weekend out of the house since March that I completely forgot to take it with me. So the recording was done on my iPhone with literally a sock on the end of it as a wind guard. Man, it was windy that weekend. So there are a few sections where you can hear that, but I don't think it's too bad, and I'm sure you'll be able to just enter into the experience we had that weekend in that North Wales wind. So grab a cuppa, pop on your walking boots as we head out into the wilds of Ynys Môn with Christopher Hughes. Walking the Talk, an interview series for DruidCast.
So where are we? This is Bod Owyr, Cromlech burial chamber.
Bod Owyr.
Bod Owyr. Yeah. Bod Owyr, which possibly means bod means abode of, and the Owyr is possibly the name of a tribe, which is quite common on the island. Many places are called the abode or the port or the dwelling of a particular tribe. And this one is a Neolithic burial chamber. And we have over 100, I think it's around 111 scheduled ancient monuments on the Isle of Anglesey.
The Isle of Anglesey, how many miles across are we talking?
It's 24 miles wide by 26 miles long.
And it's got all of those scheduled monuments on that small...
Currently scheduled, but we know that so many have been destroyed.
Yeah.
So what was here prior to industrialisation and the building of roads is anybody's guess, really, but there's a lot. And some of these, whilst there are people here currently, 3 people, which is unusual. I've never been here and seen other people here, but I think because of the pandemic, people have been more inclined to seek out the hidden places that they might not ordinarily have taken themselves to, this being one of them.
So we're looking across a field, and in the field is your typical cromlech or dolmen or coit, if you're Cornish, of the standing stones with a capstone, and that would have been covered with a mound of earth.
Yes,
that's been kind of eroded away over thousands of years, leaving the chamber exposed. So there you go. Yeah. Hi. Well, let's go and have a look.
Yes. Have a look. You know what I love about coming to these windswept places, because it is quite windswept.
It is windy,
and even on a calm and quiet day, you still feel the wind, and it always reminds me of how Marth in the 4th branch, if anything was caught on the breeze, he would hear it. And I love coming to these places and participating in that kind of an exercise of what can you hear in the stillness and silence of a place, the abode of the ancestors, and what voices are there on on the winds.
Yeah.
Coming from today for September is unusually warm, coming from the south, and skimming over the top of the chamber. There's, I don't know, maybe 300 sheep keeping us company.
That's right. Yeah,
as well.
And the mountains of Snowdonia over there. Just...
Yes. So, and the mountain range directly in front of it is particularly interesting. It's called the Carneddau range, the Carneddau, which means the cairns, and that has several hundred cairns upon it. So we know our ancestors used to take the bones of their dead to these reliquaries, these ossuaries for the dead, up on the mountains, and these places look out towards those locations as well, which I'd imagine isn't entirely coincidental.
No, not
that
at all.
There are particular vistas from some of the stone monuments of Anglesey. So many of them are framing or pointing in the direction. The pointed ends of our monuments will often point towards Arwyddfa, Snowdon in particular. But the name itself, Arwyddfa, the high place of magic, the high place of the Druids, the sages, the wise ones. So perhaps it was relevant that she has some connection to whatever happened here.
Well, they're imposing and visible.
They are, aren't they? Yes.
And what's the name of Snowdon again?
Arwyddfa. Arwyddfa. So because of the definitive article, you don't hear the G sound, Gwyddfa. So Gwydd means sage, wisdom behind, to know, to see. And it's the root word of science and magic in the Welsh language. So it's the high place of all of those associative words. Which is rather lovely. Which, of course, is completely absent in the translation Snowdon.
Yes.
Yes. Which is a romantically beautiful title. The abode of snow.
Yes.
Not that she gets an awful lot of snow, but...
Yeah.
So you can see how the entrance to this particular monument is orientated towards the northwest.
Right.
And that is a commonality on the Isle of Anglesey. So predominantly this style from this era, they do point towards the northwest, which of course even in today's modern pagan calendar is a significant place of the dead.
Absolutely.
A significant place for this time of year. We're now approaching Calan Samhain,
on the wheel of the year.
And she has I just find it remarkable that very little remains of how our ancestors lived, but so much remains of how our ancestors marked the particular passages of human life.
Yeah.
The ancestors and a sense of permanence.
Absolutely, and they must have, they obviously had a far closer relationship with the cycles of life and death than we do. You've often said in your talks that we are shielded from death, whereas that did not exist as an idea to the people who built this.
Yes,
this tomb.
There's a visceral quality to the process that would have taken place. They practiced excarnation, so the placing of the bodies on platforms so that they can be consumed by natural forces and creatures and insects.
That's my choice. I'd love to be have a sky burial. Just give me to the foxes.
Yeah,
the birds. This is good protein. This I don't need it anymore.
People might object if a random arm comes along whilst you're having a barbecue. but that process would have been quite visceral.
Yeah.
And I think sometimes, because I've heard, there are times you come to these places and there are tourists and they assume that the bodies of the dead would have been placed in here, because that's what we do today. We place the whole bodies of our dead in the ground or into a crematorium. But of course these weren't. These were reliquaries, is that how you say it? Reliquaries? Ossuaries. They were places for bones. So the bones had been pecked clean, and one assumes they would have been in some form of decorative basket or whatever, being brought into this place. But everybody would have been a part of that process.
And there's evidence they didn't stay there either, that they were brought out.
They moved them,
at certain points of the year.
They moved them about.
Yeah.
And there are places there have been places on Anglesey where they've found the bones of the dead tucked underneath dwellings,
Right.
as if they kept the ancestors there for a time before moving them to a location. And whilst the monument has a sense of permanence, that isn't necessarily true for its inhabitants.
Yeah. Well, it is very windy. I hope this recording is coming out okay. We'll find out when I try and listen to it. Well, the other thing I've noticed is that your trees here are much further along autumn. I mean, some of these trees are bare.
They are. And it has happened rather quickly as well. In the last week, there's been a marked change. But have you noticed there's an expression on the island of Anglesey? So if you look at the trees to our right over there, they're leaning towards the east. And that's quite a common feature on the windward side of the island, which is where we are at the moment.
Yeah.
And in Welsh, we call it cerdded allan o'r gwynt, which means walking out of the wind. And that's what they're doing. They're stepping out of the wind.
There's a real obvious one there.
Yes, that's it.
Yeah.
She's stepping over that way. So it's mightily windy on this side. I shall lean
Where's the
towards
prevailing wind coming from? I can't possibly tell.
So on the leeward side of the island, they don't do that at all. They stand quite straight.
Yeah.
But I rather like the appearance of those that walk out of the winds, because they have a defined personality. They have character. And even, I don't know, I just think that the trees in themselves tell a story of the landscape on an island that is relatively small. Mm-hmm. They're still telling different stories to such a small location, and capture an essence of the magic of this place, even though these things do as well. The monument's behind us. But
very much so. Yeah. It's like Cornwall as well. Is you can tell the prevailing wind. In fact, Kerry calls them Arthur Scargill trees because I don't remember his hair. He used to flop around.
Oh yeah.
The trees have Arthur Scargill haircut.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we have arrived on the processional route to Bryn Celli Ddu.
It does have a sense of procession.
Mm-hmm.
One can promenade down here.
Yes.
Knowing that there is something extraordinary and special at the end of this particular route. And whilst this is a very modern route, because we come here as modern day Druids to practice our civic public rituals for the summer solstice and the winter solstice, this is our modern processional route.
Yeah.
And it has become a sacred part of the journey that we make to approach.
Well, it has got a sense of pilgrimage going along here, hasn't it? It's like, it gives you that opportunity to think and to centre before you actually get to the main event at the end.
It does, it does. And it's just over half a mile long, so it's not far, but it's enough distance for you to have pause in the quiet of this place. So I particularly love coming to this place in the middle of the night when there's absolutely little chance of encountering another human being.
Yeah.
And this is part of the joy of that approach, is the procession. And we meet one of our local goddesses en route, which is the goddess Braint, the tutelary deity of the River Braint. And she's our goddess of healing and smithcraft and poetry and sovereignty.
Right.
And she floods at the beginning of February every year. So she shares a commonality with all of the other derived goddesses.
Yeah.
Bridget, Brigantia, Britannia.
And she's up ahead.
And she's
a
up
little
ahead,
way,
yes.
Yeah.
And I often wonder what the Romans made of these particular kind of places.
Yeah.
And of course they didn't particularly write about the monuments. This one has been written about by some of the classical authors, but not necessarily from an archaeological perspective, but more as a natural phenomenon. But Anglesey herself was, or Ynys Môn, was target to the Roman Empire. And one has to pause and consider, why did Caesar consider a small island to the west of Britain such a threat to his empire? To send one of his chief commanders, Suetonius Paulinus, here in 62 of the Common Era. What was it? Why come all this way? To bring 20,000 men-at-arms to this small island to destroy a threat to the most powerful empire on our planet. And so they came. There was a bloody attack, which is documented by Tacitus on the banks of the Menai Straits, where the women of the island were the first line of defense. Our mothers defended the island. Behind them were our warrior caste. Behind those were the Druids calling imprecations to the skies and calling for the help of the gods to protect the island. And of course the Romans advanced, and the Druids were suppressed, destroyed. They weren't necessarily annihilated, because elements of that tradition continued in the bardism of this land. But perhaps the liturgical components have been lost to us. But we have a refrain that we take much glee in when it comes to the memory of the Romans, which is Dani yma o hyd. We are still here. We might be different, but we are still here. So it took another 18 years before the sublimation of Anglesey was complete. Suetonius retreated to take care of the problem that was Boadicea in what is now the Midlands. And it took another 18 years before Agricola came, and the takeover of Anglesey was complete.
Thank you. Thank you for waiting. It's a bit narrow there. Thank you. And one thing I've noticed as we're walking and talking here is like the hedgerow here is an apothecary. It's got yarrow, it's got hawthorns. There's so many magical plants.
It's quite
along here.
It's spectacular. And I often think when we carry on as well, parallel to the river, it is an Ogham storybook.
Really?
This entire route is an Ogham storybook. Almost all of them.
Dog rose there.
Dog roses are here. There's vervain. There's my favourites are the red campions, and the blackberries are not doing so well this year, actually. I think we've had a peculiar year when it comes to climate. And but this here is ranked.
So we've got a bridge, and it going across a small river, a little. And this is it.
So this is the River Bright. So on our procession to Bryn Celli Ddu, we always stop and we offer Bright a libation, a little drink, and
so
give
she's
her
right
thanks.
Underneath us right now, just flowing through the countryside.
And she's quite narrow, but she cuts the southern aspect of the island in half. And she's unique in that she has two estuaries. And she starts in the east of the island in a place called Mynydd Llwydiarth, or the Mountain of the Grey Bear.
Wow, that's a great name.
But we give her thanks for her fertility and for the richness of the soil. And predominantly the monuments to the southern aspect of the Isle of Anglesey are usually aligned adjacent to the river. Our ancestors created man-made ports that led off the river so that they could access the river from various locations and various sacred sites. So assumedly so that they could sail from that particular location, like a little bit further down the river widens quite significantly. So she inspires us to be poetic and creative. She inspires us to analyse our own inner sovereignty and what that means. She floods quite dramatically in February to cover the entire path that we've walked down, which looks quite remarkable from when you consider how deep she is.
Yes.
So I have a vial of homemade, I think it's hawthorn wine, this one in particular. So we stop here and acknowledge that braint ydy ein diwyes o barddoniaeth a sofraniaeth, a da ni'n ddiolchgar I ti am dy anrhegion a dy fendithion, that to braint we give thee thanks for fertile soil, for abundance. Braint, goddess of this river, accept this offering. Know that we honour you. Know that we love you. Braint, bendithion arna ti.
Blessings.
And it's nice that even in a procession of 300 people, you see this Druid transmitted infection that occurs because this bridge is really narrow.
Yes.
You can't get an awful lot of people here. So whoever's at the head of the processional queue, if you like, will stop here, and you see this infection of giving offerings spread down to the very end.
Yeah.
You know, who can't even see what's occurring on the bridge, and yet they're compelled to be prompted by it, and inspired by it.
Yes.
You know,
it's very moving. Very moving. Oh, and the narrow path again.
And this time surrounded by ash trees and oak.
So this is
Blackthorn and hawthorn.
the Owen Walk.
Yeah, so this is part, so it's split. So the path continues to the right-hand side of the river. We're on the left side of the river. And yet the Owen storybook unfolds on either side of the path.
Yeah. And your order has a good relationship with Cadw, which is like the, Welsh heritage people who... Do they own this site, or are they custodians of it? Do they actually have ownership of it?
Cadw is a government agency. They are part of the Welsh Assembly government, and they're in charge of the safeguarding and protecting of our ancient monuments. So they maintain the pathways and they maintain the fencing and and making sure that everybody who comes here is safe to do so. But they are a government agency, so for us to have been taken into their trust is significant.
Yes.
There was a point in time where we may have been perceived as fringe.
Yeah.
And to many, we were perceived as lunatic fringe. And now not so fringe. So whenever Cadw engage or participate in events here that serve to educate the public, they include us. Not because they think it's the right thing to do or that it's politically correct to include us. They include us because they want to, because they believe that our connection and relationship to this place is an important aspect of Bryn Celli Ddu's personality as a living monument.
As a living monument. Not just something, caught under glass that people look at, but something that is, something with a personality that is still being used. Oh, just going under some of these beautiful ash trees, and such a lovely space.
It's a lovely walk.
Yeah, it really is.
But what I love about our connection to Bryn Celli Ddu is we are members of Bryn Celli Ddu's community. Ironically, we're the least permanent members of her community. She will still be here in another 5,000-10,000 years, and we may only be an echo in.
But then you'll be the ancient Druids.
We'll be the ancient Druids again.
Exactly.
We'll be the next batch of ancient Druids.
The ancient Druids worshipped here. Then, and they really did.
They really did. And whilst there were some arguments, predominantly in the 90s and in the early 2000s, that why were the Druids here? Did they really have any right to be here?
Yes.
This is a Neolithic site. It wasn't associated with the ancient Druids. We don't know if they came here. But what we got them to appreciate and also understand is that quality of a living monument. That she was something different to every caste of people who ever connected with her. And she serves a need in us. And by us having that need quenched, and that thirst quenched for connection, she becomes something different again.
Absolutely.
So there's a
it's part of the continuum, isn't it?
Exactly. And how do you say that word in English? Reciprocity.
It's very well done. I think it's reciprocity.
Is that a word? Is that a word?
Yeah.
You know, there's that reciprocal symbiotic relationship, and whilst of course we haven't modified her in any great form apart from the tread of our footprints on the land, she doesn't look like she looked 6,000 years ago. She's been archaeologically reconstructed. Mm-hmm. So she isn't an exact replica of what was here. The mound is probably smaller. It's not as wide.
There she is.
And now that we've come out of the path, she opens up in front of us. So she's a mound. About, how tall would you say she is? 15 feet?
15 feet, probably, yeah, something like that.
And she's possibly maybe 50 feet wide at the bottom, with a deep henge cut around her, lined with stones, of which there were taller standing stones at one point. But then Bryn Celli Ddu moved into a stage of her own evolution where the standing stones were no longer necessary. Mm-hmm. So they were removed, and she went into another form, another aspect of her personality. So today we come here because she is aligned wonderfully to the midsummer sunrise. And I can't even begin to describe what that does to you to see it, because what we're looking at isn't an exact copy of what our ancestors looked at, apart from obviously the stone structure inside the mud is exactly the same. But when you see the sunrise and the phenomena,
reconstructed.
The inside is original. That's exactly as it was. Yeah. And but when you see the sun hitting the back wall, which has gold mica in the stone, so it glows with this preternatural, ethereal glow to it. You're seeing something they saw 6,000 years ago, and you're seeing it, and you almost feel beside yourself by seeing it. You can sense, that there are other eyes from the past who watched, who witnessed, who observed, and you are then privy to seeing the exact same thing,
sharing in that experience.
Yes,
just with that,
and
a little bit of a gap.
Yes, but then the gap seems completely inconsequential. To be sitting, standing, silently watching something that connects us all through time, the power of the sun, and then the quality of light on stone. And everything about Bryn Celli Ddu was about the quality of light.
It's interesting. So, Bryn Celli Ddu, tell us what it means.
So it means the hill in the dark grove.
I mean, isn't that just...
It is, isn't it?
So is that suggesting that although around us here is our open farmland, at some point this would have been within a forest, potentially? Or?
That's the logical and rational conclusion that would come to when you hear the meaning of her name. But actually, it isn't. The name is relatively new. It's only 200 or 300 years old. And it comes from the fact that for a long time, especially in the later post-Reformation, she was feared. We were a very God-fearing society. Right. These places held a mystical quality that people were instinctively afraid of by the programming of society at the time. So she was abandoned, she was left to her own devices, and of course trees grew out of her and fractured the mound and destroyed the mound, and even destroyed elements of the roof of the chamber, which have been fixed today. So when people encountered Bryn Celli Ddu, they just encountered a copse of dark woods with a sinister structure inside of it, and people were naturally repelled by a fearsome quality.
I'm reminded of there's around Avebury. If you stand within Avebury and look out on the hills, there are tumuli that I've got all like copses of trees all around, and that's what happened.
That's what she looked like. So we don't know what her original name was, and Bryn Celli Ddu comes from that particular aesthetic, if you like, of what was in the landscape. But the river that we've crossed, they artificially caused an irrigation system to flood this low-lying plain that Bryn Celli Ddu sits on a raised man-made platform. So although it just looks to us as if we're standing on a field, we're not. We're actually standing on a platform that Bryn Celli Ddu stands on top of.
Yeah.
So this is all stonework under our feet, all the way to the wall, which is a good 20 feet from where we're standing.
You pointed that out, you can see it
and
clearly.
You can see the dip there.
Absolutely.
So the depression all around us was filled with water. But they caused an intentional flooding. Now we don't know why. However, when you look at the geology, there's so much mica in the stonework here, and it has a reflective quality, which is what they use inside the chamber. So that must have held a deep significance and a profundity to the people who built and worked and connected to this area. And what I love, the thing that I really love about the archaeology of Bryn Celli Ddu, is they found what archaeologists refer to as magic stones, which are naturally polished quartz pebbles. And our rivers have them in abundance, our shoreline has them in abundance. But of course, if you bang those together, you release an energy, you release a potential within that stone, which I love because it really describes the animistic principle even in something that appears non-inanimate,
such as
like
a
rump of quartz. But bang it together and you get triboluminescence. You get this spark of light. And it's a beautiful orange light. And they found them all around here, covered in microfractures, which imply they were knocking them together and causing light. And a smell that's quite similar to gunpowder. So we've taken ourselves into the chamber in the dead of night and banged the stones together. And as a druid, as a visionary, as a magician, that takes you to another level of relationship, because immediately it felt that Bryn Celli Ddu remembered that.
Yeah, went off. I know that sound.
I know that sound. I know that light. I know that smell. And there was a certain quality to the moment, so sometimes a couple of hours spent in there just banging stones, which is quite mantraic and repetitive. And I often wonder, okay, so did they do that? And the chances are leaning towards the fact that yes, they really were doing just that. It's like, why? What were they getting from that? And I love the fact, at the moment there's a little girl and she's playing on the mound,
rolling down the hill.
Look at her, there she goes. Look at her, yay! If I did that, I'd break a hip.
I don't know. We'll have a go in a minute.
But the thing is that you've been to as many sacred monuments as I have, no doubt, and they have an air. So there's places on the island you wouldn't dream of doing that. You wouldn't dream that it almost repels you with a sense of
no, this is not
come cautiously.
Yeah.
And if we read the landscape, which I'm sure that little girl is able to do completely instinctively, she doesn't need to be told by anyone. She seems to understand on some level that Bryn Celli Ddu loves the frivolity and the joviality of connection. So when Cadw hosts an open day here to coincide with their community archaeology project, always to coincide with the summer solstice, and they will have stalls all around this area, which I'm not entirely sure how big this area is. Maybe it's 120 feet by 100 feet by 100 by 100.
Yeah,
maybe.
It looks about that. Yeah,
a square enclosure. So you'll have people here who are experts in Neolithic arts and crafts and foods and archaeologists and Cadw themselves, educating people about.
She's off again.
She is.
Down.
And we are here. The Druids are here, talking about the spiritual significance of Bryn Celli Ddu. And it didn't happen this year because of the pandemic, but last year over 700 people came to that open day and learned something about her nature. And so many people report that whilst there's a solemnity within the chamber, outside of her there's a sense of celebration. There's a sense of life and joyousness.
Pick it up even now. It's like it's not a somber place.
She likes to play. And we'll come at Calan Mai at Beltane, and we'll put flowers in her hair and decorate her entrances with flowers, and and make love to her in a way, you know, as a part of our community.
Yeah.
She holds the seeds of light. She holds the seeds of summer as the summer solstice sun beams into the central chamber, and then she gives birth to that at the winter solstice.
This is what I think we need. We need that fresh reconnection to our landscape. And you know, we know that the Druids may not have used this, but us as modern Druids have kind of negotiated that relationship with her, and now it's real and alive and a part of modern tradition.
It is,
you know, and I don't think we should ever belittle that at all.
No.
You know, it's important.
It is
part of the story,
and it's testament also to her quality and her ability to express a quality that we need as modern Druid practitioners.
Yeah,
we need that. More children.
Let's walk over here a little bit.
Children love it. They love it.
Yeah, there they go.
Oh.
So we are now inside the tomb. There are children everywhere. You probably hear them. We may be interrupted, but that is live podcasting. So what can we see here?
So the chamber has a corridor leading from the outside in, which is about, 25 feet long, into an a hexagonal chamber with a single phallic-like structure in the middle, and there's a bit of a mythology attached to this pillar. So I'm 6'3", so that pillar is at least 5'10", isn't it?
Yeah.
And there's a myth attached to it that she's a petrified tree.
I have heard that,
and that does carry a certain romanticism, perhaps, especially to modern pagans. However, she's not a petrified tree. She's a particular kind of stone, and
we've been joined by three little children. Are just
we're recording, you see.
We're recording for a show.
Are you new
for
to
a
this?
show.
We're not feeling.
So it's not.
No.
She's 7 and she's 4.
Really?
Yes.
And what do you think? What do you think of this place? What do you think of it? Do you like this
I
place?
like it very much because
Yeah.
it has shelves I can pick up.
Where have you come from then?
Holiday.
From where? Where do you live?
Wales.
Where in Wales?
We're not living in Wales, man. We just have a caravan in Wales.
Okay.
Today
Well, maybe we'll continue this outside.
We'll carry on in a minute.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's not a petrified.
It's
tree.
not. It's actually a little bit more magical than a petrified tree. She's blue schist, and she's a volcanic pillow. So she's a product of volcanic activity underwater. And these pillows were exuded, almost vomited out by the earth into cold seawater, where they formed these natural pillow shapes.
Yeah.
So, but these are underwater. Wow. They're underwater a good 40 feet off the western coast of Anglesey at a significant depth. So not only did they know that the stones were there, they were also able somehow to retrieve these stones.
And bring it here.
And bring her here from the coast. She doesn't belong to this particular region. And erect it here inside this chamber.
And it is odd to be within a burial chamber and have a standing stone like that tall inside. It's
quite unique. It is quite unique. So the chamber has an opening at the back, which faces the direction of the sunset at midwinter, and the passageway to my left faces approximately northeast, where the sun of the summer solstice shines a beam of light down this chamber to the furthest wall, which has mica in it, which of course is imperceptible to our eyes, apart from this stone, which is hit. The stone to my left is being hit by natural sunlight.
It's a little shiny bit down there.
Yes.
Yeah, there it is.
But if you look at this one here, you can see the mica is shining.
Yeah.
So when the sunrise cast its light upon the stone, you get a reflective quality, and it looks like liquid gold.
Yeah,
It's quite beautiful.
Yeah.
So there isn't an awful lot of space in here. We don't know why they chose to erect what seemingly looks quite phallic
Within a
womb-like structure, but we can assume. and make guesses as to what that means.
Yes, with the sun coming
the seed
in
of light
through this. Yes, absolutely.
And the fact that she is aligned to summer and to winter solstice.
Yeah.
So she holds the light within her and gives birth to it again at winter solstice, which is a beautiful... And whilst we're probably making those connections and attaching those connections to this place, we don't know whether they had the same thought processes, but it makes her relevant.
Mm-hmm.
And it, and one can fixate as well on what did it mean to the past. Well, for it to have meaning today, she needs to have something that's significant and has a profundity to us.
Yeah.
Otherwise, she is a relic, and we don't perceive her as a relic. As you can see, I mean, there's a what would you describe that? It's not even a, what is it? It's a, I thought it was a dead cat when we came in.
It's a little,
but it's a toy.
It's a toy, and
a cuddly toy.
There's some yarrow and there's seashells, and it's and the kids have been picking up all the seashells and running around with them.
Yes.
I think. But these,
there are offerings.
Got little bits of yarrow put in there as well.
There's a photograph of what one might assume is somebody who is deceased on the shelf coming into the passageway, and there's a compulsion. People are compelled to leave a gift to the ancestors, and from the people that I've encountered myself who have left offerings, they wouldn't identify as pagans. They wouldn't identify as druids or witches or otherwise, as ordinary people who feel compelled to leave something that is of note, that is significant to them. And there's an element of that which is beautiful. There's an element of that which is a problem, because it can become litter as well,
Yeah.
And
yes,
it has to be, periodically, it has to be cleared, otherwise you wouldn't be able to get in here.
Yeah, and that's part of it as well. I think the children want us to get out so they can get back in their den. But it is cleared up, and it's part of, there are people who don't like it, and there are people who see it as part of the, like we say, the continuum and renegotiation and kind of a relationship with this thing of finding that. And a lot of people, I wonder if we were to ask the people outside, why are you here? Yeah. I wonder what they would say. Why did you get up this morning and decide to go to a burial chamber? Yes. It's a day out with your children.
Yes. yes. See, somebody has been leaving flowers here probably this morning as well.
Yeah, they're pretty fresh, aren't they?
Yes.
Yarrow flowers. So walked up this gravel path onto some grass, and ahead of us is a pool. Well, yeah, pool.
A small lake.
A small lake, yeah.
Yes.
Okay, so where are we? And
this is called Llyn Cerrig Bach, the Lake of the Small Stones. It's perhaps Anglesea's most sacred site to those of a Druid persuasion, and yet it's the one where you require the most imagination and vision, because it's just a lake, and it's pretty, but the contrast is quite startling, because we've driven through a Royal Air Force base to get here. It's part of the Royal Air Force complex. It's under the jurisdiction of the Ministry of Defence.
Wow.
And yet they found in this spot in 1943.
Oh, it's windy, isn't it?
It's really windy.
Yeah.
The largest hoard of Druid-related artefacts in Britain,
which is amazing,
called the Llyn Cerrig Bach hoard. Over 300 items, which were all new. They were all pre-depositionally damaged and then thrown from a small hill, which has been unfortunately blown away by the Ministry of Defence, and into this lake. And most of the offerings come from the time that the Romans were invading Britain.
Right.
There are artefacts that predate that, but most of them come from that particular era. And So the hill behind us, which we can't really see, it's quite low. In the native tongue, it's called Bryn Celli, the Hill of Hooves, which is rather lovely, isn't it? That's a really good name for a hill. Unfortunately, today it's called Tacan Hill,
which means
tactical air control and navigation.
I'll have the hooves.
So when I say you really have to use a little bit of your vision to be here, there are times when I've been here to do what a druid does with his ancestors, when suddenly, a fighter jet will go right over your head up at a height where you could almost touch it, which is terrifying when you can feel your teeth rattle in your skull when you're trying to have a spiritual moment.
Yeah.
But the thing that's remarkable about this place is we know they were here.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
We know they were here. They were actively here and being and casting and yet we still don't know why they were here. And this entire region, which is quite a large area of lakes and marshland and bogs, you do need a little bit of imagination. Kerry's giving an offering to the ancestors as we are speaking.
Yes.
Of golden mead.
Mm-hmm.
Hail to the ancestors.
Indeed, there it goes.
And so the fact that we know that they were here, I feel remarkably close to my Druid ancestors when I come here. And yet it's perhaps the most difficult place visually to connect to anything because there is nothing to see.
Yeah, it's not like a burial chamber. It's not like a stone circle or anything, but it's profound. You can feel it.
Yes.
You absolutely can feel it. And also I've seen pictures of the things that of the hoard that was found here. And
but imagine there's a lady that we know today. She occasionally does some little lectures and presentations for the Druids. Her name's Evelyn, and it was her father that was responsible for this discovery in 1943. So to give you a little snapshot, the runway to our left, maybe about 50 yards away, was being extended so that the American flying fortresses were able to land to aid with the war effort. Mm-hmm. So they needed some shale and material to be the foundation for the runway. So they started dredging this lake and the adjacent bog to get some material. So as they did, Mr. Roberts came along with his tractor and his dredger, and the chain snapped, shot off into the mud. They scrambled about for an hour. They found the chain. They reattached the chain. Mr. Roberts had gone off for his lunch at this point, and when he came back, he said, "Where's my chain?" Why is it there? And he said, "That's not my chain." And he looked and he said, "That's a 2,000-year-old gang chain." And it was. So they called Cyril Fox, who was Wales's most eminent archaeologist at the time from Cardiff University. He came up. They ceased all dredging, and the archaeologists came and they found all of this stuff, but they're still finding stuff here, and remarkably every now and again something will end up on eBay from this very location and the lake behind. So at the end of the lake here, you can see all these reeds that surround the lake, and at the very end it just appears that there's just a rock face. But that's actually the London to Holyhead train line. So not only if you're coming here to commune and be quiet with the Druids, you have the fighter jets, but you also have Virgin trains to contend with as well, which crosses this area. So they are still finding stuff. But also we know that so many of the local men that worked here in 1943 took the bit of a sword, and they were given a little bit of a cauldron and a little bit of a chariot wheel. So there's no doubt old sheds scattered throughout the island that have old bits of ironmongery from the 2,000 years ago. And it's I still find it a remarkable place, and it is where I come to seek counsel and the company of my Druid ancestors, because I know they were here.
Well, that's it. That's what this is. I mean, Bryn Celli Ddu and
Bodowyr?
But yes,
Yeah.
you know, they predate. You know,
They do, yes.
Whereas this is contemporary with
Yes.
with those people who we as modern druids take our inspiration from.
Yes.
And those very hands broke those swords and the chains and everything. And there was some slave chains, wasn't there? You know,
There was slave
so
chains.
it shows a kind of darker aspect to our ancestors as well.
It does
in that.
show, but also I think people will fixate on that as well, especially modern television documentaries. They'll fixate on that as if we in the 21st century are
Yes.
pure and light and bright.
Yeah.
You know, we do equally atrocious things in the name of justice, and we don't know who their prisoners were or for what reason they were prisoners, and so I always have a sense that I feel closer to them here, and I have. And again, I tend to come to this place, Bryn Celli Ddu. I tend to come in the middle of the night because there is a silence and you're not going to be disturbed. There are no fishermen or anything that come here.
It's quite a dark pool, isn't it?
It is. It is quite dark. But it's also the lake extends over the mound, which is a much larger lake, which has never been explored or dredged.
So this section here is where they found the hoard, though.
Yes,
in this part here,
and the hill would have been right in front of us here, which of course is nothing now but reeds, and it finished parallel to this almost a little harbour, isn't it? In front of us, and it had a cliff face,
and that's where they would have walked
point
up to that and dropped
and thrown them in. But I came here on an archaeological lecture and walk a few years ago, and the archaeologist made an interesting analogy. He was describing the cauldron that they found and also the Triskel plaque, which looks as if it should be about somebody's neck, but it's much too small to go about someone's neck. And he described the value of these items, and he was explaining how the equivalent today would be going and buying a brand new top-of-the-range Audi Sport, putting it on a low loader, never turning the key, bringing it here and dropping it in the lake. These things were priceless, and they were treasures. They were you wouldn't put any monetary value on them.
The sacrifice of the offering.
That was the
isn't it?
sacrifice.
That's it.
And this place made that sacred.
I wonder if it was, speculating. I wonder if it was kind of like a come on, help us with this invasion of Romans, and if it was connected with that kind of plea for the land to rise. And
in my musings, I think so.
Yeah,
very much so. Because there's a prevalence of artifacts from the 1st century here. Although there's older stuff, there's a prevalence from the 1st century, and we were in that peculiar quandary with Rome for most of the 1st century. So one can, I imagine that. But even today, I think, so this Royal Air Force Base is famous for one particular type of aircraft, and it's the Merlin.
Yeah, and that in itself, absolutely.
And I love that.
Yeah.
And in the 1920s, when a representative was sent up from Westminster from the Ministry of Defence to locate a new airfield in northwest Wales, they were afforded 2 choices that allowed, quick access to the sea, flat landscape in which to build a runway. And it was this location, which is called Cymran, is its native name, and a location on the mainland called Dinastinlle, the city of Llell.
Yeah.
And that's where another airport would have been. Yeah. But they chose this one, and I wonder, they chose a location in defence of Britain.
Yeah.
And they chose this location, which may have had a role in the defence of Britain
2,000 years beforehand.
And did that little man that came from the Ministry of Defence tantalisingly catch a glimpse of that somehow?
Yeah, somehow it's connected.
Somehow, yeah.
And on top of that, so the Merlin engine goes inside the Spitfire.
Yes.
And that's the key to the Battle of Britain.
Yes.
And it all started on the edge of this, which was also connected potentially with another
Battle of Britain
invasion.
And I love those connections. Yes. And there's not a scrap of proof or anything to connect with, but I love it.
Good
I sit here and I muse on it. And I find that is inspiring. And whilst, of course, today, when we come here, we offer the lake and we offer the memory of our ancestors mead. We We no longer throw metal objects.
Throw your Audi sports car. You've got to break the door first.
Yeah.
But, you know.
But, you know, mead is fine.
As we
It's
just
a
saw
nice
with
little
Kerry
offering.
doing
As Kerry just did.
Yeah.
And so there's that, I don't know, this place offers me a space in which to peer through the curtain and veil of time and feel that I am with the echo of the old Druids. You know?
Yeah.
And I don't really know what they would think of us as new Druids, but I think a part of them might recognise themselves in us, and we might recognise a bit of ourselves in them.
Yeah.
You know, and whilst they had significantly more political clout than we do in the 21st century as being advisors to kings, and they were still our ancestors, and I feel close to them here.
Well, thank you.
And I love that.
Thank
I
you
love
for bringing
being
me here.
here. Even though it's just a little lake.
Yeah. It's a beautiful lake. This energy here. Yeah, you can feel it. It's like it's watching and listening. So, you know, just like, it's almost like it would rise up and interrupt us if we were way off.
So hold on a minute.
Yeah, that's
hold on a minute.
No, we've been listening, but that bit was rubbish. Brilliant.
Precious little thing, she lives on Flower Street, wears a moonstone in her ring. In the summer, I won her. What can we do to make it right? Picking and singing is a lonely way of life. Nowhere to run, oh, for to hide. We'll still be singing old folk songs from the other side. The summer in the northern hemisphere is better than a ticket for the short way out of here. The summer's for lovers. What can we do to make it right? Picking and singing is a lonely way of life. Nowhere to run, oh, for to hide. We'll still be singing old folk songs from the other side. That winter sun will surely run that mighty river dry. But when summer comes, that same old sun reflects the love still in your eye, and the river's running high. My Maybelle, she's a precious little thing. She lives on Flower Street, wears a moonstone in her ring. In the summer, I won her. What can we do to make it right? Picking and a singing is a lonely way of life. Nowhere to run, oh, for to hide. We'll still be singing old folk songs from the other side. It's a precious little thing. It's a precious little thing.
Well, I hope you enjoyed that walk. It was so good to have a weekend away. I cannot tell you how good that felt. We did a little autumn equinox ritual up at the Druid Circle at Penmaen Mawr, overlooking the sea, and then had a picnic of cheese and biscuits in the sunshine. You know, us Druids, man, we know how to party, right? After the Walking the Talk section, you heard a song from the new album by Desert Angels called Maybell, and I just adore that country vibe. Thank you, Stuart, for sending that in, and I'm so happy that you are enjoying the OBOD course too. Next up, we have a song called Almost Home, and there's a little story about it I'd like to tell you from Brian, who says, Sheffield musicians broadcasting a live in lockdown concert from a home studio onto a Facebook group were surprised to find that some of the far-flung audience spread from Greece to California were playing along live. According to violinist Matt Howden, I noticed that as Andy Whitehouse was playing, someone posted that they were playing along on a harmonium out in California, and when I mentioned it, someone else piped up that they were playing along on a recorder in Athens. I was knocked out, said Andy. On the spur of the moment, I suggested we might record a version of the song and invite members of the audience to contribute parts for Matt to mix into one song performed by the community that are watching Matt's online gigs. A month later, and the contributions are in, everything from knitting needles to electric harp, from fingerstyle bass to singing and spoken word in half a dozen languages make up a collage of sound expertly mixed by Matt for the single Almost Home, with all proceeds going to local charity Assist Sheffield. We work with refugees who have been refused the right to remain but are from countries that are unsafe to return to and are thus trapped in limbo, said Assist volunteer Berth Kirkup. I thought Assist would be suitable beneficiaries given the wonderful work they do, and the song being about hanging on to hope in what seems like a never-ending journey, something only too familiar to the brave refugees looking for help here, concluded Andy. You can buy Almost Home from their site on Bandcamp, and you can find a link to that in the show notes. So here is Almost Home by the Lockdown Seaburn Facebook group. What a project.
Presque à la maison, presque à la maison, nous sommes presque à la maison, allongés sous le ciel, regardez les étoiles, alors qu'elles tournoient dans la nuit.
It's hard to tell if that ahead is cloud or land, as this old steamship struggles on with all the speed its engines can command. Oh, if you guys labouring below can keep on shoveling the coal, keeps the fire burning in the soul. See us safe to harbour and never more to roam. We're almost home. We're almost home. Salt water turned to steam over the furnaces that burn on through the dark. The faces and the forearms of the firemen breathe lit by a flame and spark. Oh, if you guys labouring below can keep on shoveling the coal that keeps the fire burning in the soul. See it safe to harbour, never more to roam. We're almost home. bricks. Cast your reeds upon the rolling waves. Just lay a finger on the wheel. You'll find that without fail, vibrations strong and true. Gonna get you home safe soon. So lay under the sky and watch the stars as they go spinning through the night. Those guys are working down below, and in the end it all will be alright. Oh, if you guys working down below can keep on shoveling the coal that keeps the fire burning in the soul. See you safe to home, never more to roam. We're almost home.
Well, my friends, that is a show, but before I go, let's have the results of last month's competition. The prize was a Dave the Bard Lockdown Tour t-shirt, and the question I asked was, what is the name of the woods Kerry and I visited during the first part of the Walking the Talk interview last month? Now, I accepted both Sleepy Hollow and the Dark, Dark Woods, and the first name drawn from the hat and winner of that t-shirt is John Allison from Kingston, USA. Congratulations, John. That t-shirt will be with you as soon as possible. It does have to be printed, so be patient, but you'll love it when it arrives. And talking of my lockdown tour, this Saturday the 24th of October, it continues this weekend from my Dave the Bard Facebook page with House Concert number 10 at 8 p.m. UK time. That's facebook.com/Dave the Bard at 8 p.m. So do join me for another lockdown pagan music party if you can. The prize this month is a copy of the Celtic Tarot deck by my guest on the walk, Christopher Hughes. It's an incredible RWS tarot with all the cards depicting images from Celtic mythology, and the question I'd like you to answer is, during the walk we visited the burial mound called Bryn Celli Ddu, which is aligned to the sunrise on which important day of the Wheel of the Year? During the talk we visited the burial mound called Bryn Celli Ddu, which is aligned to the sunrise on which important day of the Wheel of the Year? Email your answer along with your full postal address to podcast@druidry.org, and one of you will win that amazing tarot deck. Go on, have a go. You've got nothing to lose. As the year descends here into the northern hemisphere and we hear the wings of the Cailleach, bringing with her darker evenings and colder days, our friends in the southern hemisphere are welcoming the height of spring with Beltane, one of my favourite expressions of the magic that is the seasons here on this paradise of a planet. Wherever you are and whichever festival you are celebrating, may it bring you wonder and joy, my friends. I'll be here again next month with DruidCast episode 164. But until then, I wish you as ever peace and blessed be. Goodbye.